present day. Started with rain after a long time of heat and humid. This rain started second season. So it's my duty to welcome the chief guest today. We introduce one by one. I know Manipal sir is familiar to many of you, but Sreeradha Datta is not that familiar to senior people. Yes. Today's program is Sreeradha ma'am is going to give a lecture on understanding India's policy in the neighborhood. That is a very important topic, and this is the most important development happening in the South Asian region. Yesterday, last days you might have come across the Sri Lankan developments, and many things are happening across. So this is an opportunity for all of you to understand, listen, and understand what is India's neighborhood policy and what India should do. And we have a very good resource person for that. Dr. Sreeradha Datta, who is the currently the head of the neighborhood studies in EAF, that is Vivekananda International Foundation, and she was the director of MACAIS, that is Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, when a few years ago, and now she is with the EAF, and she has contributed a lot on South Asia matters and written books. And as I said, like, she is not familiar to you people, but seniors are familiar because she was very much part of the center from the department for a long time. We have organized several conferences, national seminars, and she was very much into that. She supported us as part of MACAIS. And she presented papers on different aspects, especially related to neighborhood policy. 2014, there was a seminar, national seminar on China's strategic rise and implications for India. Madam has supported us for the program. The department and MACAIS were big sponsors. And India program was there, and one foreign policy seminar was there. All were very much participated by good specialists in the international relations, and South Asia was handled by Sreeradha ma'am. Recently, one book she has released on India Bangladesh One Economy at 50. I think you all participated in the discussion. That was online due to COVID reasons. It was not properly. We could not make it in real sense, but virtual program was happened. And she has contributed. She has written a good number of books, around 7 or 8. I don't know exactly now, but I think what I have gathered is 8. Many of them are published by IDSA and other publishing houses. And many of them are on Northeast policies and India's neighborhood policies and Bangladesh. So I warmly welcome Sreeradha Datta ma'am to today's program. I'm sure my students will be using this opportunity to interact with you to get more from their side. I also welcome our mentor, our founder, Professor Manipal. Second year students might have come across, met him, and you have listened to him several times in this semester itself. But first time after COVID, he is visiting this place and meeting you. So I extend my warm welcome to Professor Manipal also. Now, students who are in the mode of exam, next week, next Monday, you are starting exam, but you found time, you were patient enough to listen our announcement and prepared and attending the program. So I welcome all of you to this program. Thank you. I invite Professor Manipal to say a few words, then we will go to the Indian.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here among young minds, and a real privilege because I know that a lot of contributions are going to be made by each of you, and I don't want to stand between you and Dr. Datta's lectures, because she has an absolute authority on South Asia, which is India is of course an important component of that, and because of the fact that South Asia is in a sense of global concern, it's that kind of analysis can be extended into different parts of the world. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'll invite Dr. Datta to give her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raghunathan and Professor Manipal, for those very, very kind words of introduction. It's always a pleasure to be here. As your professor mentioned, I've been associated with this center for quite some time now, though COVID and other reasons prevented me from coming here. But and the fact that you have guys have exam from next week and you're, I guess, forced to take time out, but I really hope it's not going to be a useless exercise for some of you who have an interest, especially in South Asia. So thank you for coming, and I really look forward to this interaction for the next few minutes. So what I'll do is I'll kind of lay out the broad contours of how I see India's foreign policy in the neighborhood unfurling. And depending on the time that we have, I'll get into each country if necessary, if any has interest, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm very unstructured usually with my talks, so I leave it open to suggestions from both the professors today and all of you as to how you want it. But let me just start with the broad contours first, and we'll take it from there. Usually, and I often, when I start speaking on a subject, I try and always have some kind of a quote in mind. But when I'm speaking on the neighborhood, something that T.S. Eliot had written keeps coming back. He had written it in different contexts completely. But I think whenever I speak and try to understand what is happening in the neighborhood, this is kind of a recurring theme for me. Where he says that between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. Because in trying to understand India's foreign policy in the neighborhood, from the Indian perspective, we think that we are doing it all right. If you speak to our neighbors, it's always a lot of critiques and criticism which falls out. The whole point here is that for all of us who try and, students of international politics, trying to understand neighborhood, it's always the shadows which actually tell you the bigger story. So for students of geopolitics, I think what you hear, what you read, and then what you actually mull in is where the real story lies. Because all of us say, oh, but Prime Minister said so. Oh, but their president said so. But a lot of policies happen, policies get undertaken, policies fall flat on their faces because of the layers that work in between. And that's why I started with this quote. Just a few days ago, England in Delhi now started physical interactions and physical panels and talks. We were talking, I was at a panel on foreign policy, I was talking neighborhood, where another co-panelist talked about how this is the age of policy insecurity, in the sense that there is no one policy that you can undertake and say, okay, this is a done deal here. We are going to hold on to this for the next 10 years. And I think that is so apt, especially for the neighborhood. Here we thought we were on, a very good footing with Afghanistan. We were doing so much of work. We were, investing in all kinds of soft infrastructure, hard infrastructure. And we saw the unraveling which took everybody by surprise. So I'm just saying that it's very, very difficult to actually hold on to a policy. Of course, the larger policies, and I think I'm going to quote Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who said, I'm not really quoting him directly, but something like he said that the success of India's foreign policy actually lies in how effective you are in the neighborhood. Because that is really the core. If you are not able to keep your neighborhood together in some sense, your rest of the other larger issues with the rest of the world is going to have differences more, because if you have to have a cohesive neighborhood, which is actually what tells you how you kind of go ahead with it. But we've seen that it's actually, it's very easy to say so. It's never a policy in stable and security. But the point here when I speak about neighborhood is that, right now, of course, we know about the fact that neighborhood first. I mean, that's been a very, very good name tag that we've seen from 2014 when Prime Minister moved to over. I actually argue that, and again, some of you noticing it, you've seen that in the last few months there's been another focus on it, and I think the Ministry of External Affairs has now put up a group on neighborhood first and trying to get the act together. But I actually argue that the neighborhood first policy, while of course for all of us who work with policies and neighborhood stuff, has been a wonderful reference point. For the academia, it's actually first that we actually have something to refer to have a context of a framework to work on. But what it at the same time did was it raised the expectations of the entire neighborhood. And everybody around the neighborhood thought that one was going to take care of all the problems. It is simply not possible. And this is what I'm saying when we do the neighborhood first. We've seen how during his first, he was swearing in ceremony, he called the neighbors, and there was a lot of bonhomie. He did, I think his first visit was to Bhutan, and then I think the next time it was to Sri Lanka. So basically his first, very noticeable trips in near abroad was the neighborhood. He really had a huge focus there. For the first time we've seen a Prime Minister of India, talking at the Nepal Parliament. So there were many firsts that we have to, remember when we're discussing foreign policy, neighborhood first policy in this instance. But the point here, and I keep arguing this much against most of my other people that I work with, saying that it's actually at some level done India a little harm. Because there's always, and I come to the second point here, neighborhood, the issue here always is the matter of asymmetry. India is about what? Statistically, 70% of everybody's economy, everybody's, human indexes and all of it together. So there is a huge gap. So there is always this constant reference to about India being the big brother. Not necessarily only in terms of the physical, geographical terms, but also, in terms of how we've been able to put a lot of things together for whatever reasons. Everyone has many factors why we've been able to, why others have not been able to. But the point is that there is that distinct physical, geographical asymmetry which constantly plays on. So the expectations from India has always been very high in the neighborhood. Whether it's Nepal, Bhutan we are discussing, Sri Lanka, Maldives we are discussing, it is always that India ought to do this for us. India ought to give us this. Hello? We are supposed to be sovereign nations. Why are we not, looking at it through a perspective of equity? We've never been able to do that. And we've always, for reasons, again, as I said, not only for Prime Minister, every Prime Minister I think has said that neighborhood is critical, because if you're not able to have a stable, secure neighborhood, your other policies don't implement the way you wish to. So I think that asymmetry is something that is going to be haunting us always. But again, flowing from this particular point, I actually have also argued, and that's my next point here, while there is a physical asymmetry, there is actually no two ways to do. The other asymmetry is actually closing in. So pre-pandemic, Bangladesh was actually racing at a higher growth than you were. Nepal was almost catching up with India. Of course, pandemic, there has been a bit of up and down in terms of the GDPs. There has been a bit of fallout. But largely, if you look at Asia now, it's China, it is India, it is Bangladesh in terms of the economic growth. In terms of the human indexes factor, many of our South Asian nations, which includes Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, of course Sri Lanka going through a major crisis at this point of time, have actually overtaken India in many ways. So there was wide a physical geography and that mindset of being a big brother, but on the other hand, the economies were actually catching up. But the point here I always make is, despite that, was the policies reflecting any of that? Was their behavior on the ground reflecting any of that? We still, and I've worked very closely with government institutes, I've seen how it functions. We always felt, oh, that neighbor, we'll handle it. But the point is that neighbor who was in 1980 at maybe 2% growth rate has now overcome your growth rate, had greater in terms of other achievements. Their attitude has changed. So that has often not reflected in the Indian attitude on the neighborhood. So there was always a kind of a reference point from the neighbors that India is very pedantic about some of them, which is rightly so, it has been. At one point of time, India was the only giver. So, it always was in the dominant position. But with this new changing of the economic table, the problem here again is that hasn't reflected in India's behavior. That hasn't reflected in their behavior also. Because their expectation of India continues. So just because I'm now doing greater growth rate than you, does that mean that you're not going to subsidize some of my other projects that I'm looking at? So, at one level, you're very proud of your achievements, you've done this, and I think Bangladesh is a case in point. They've been graduated from the low income to the middle income country, they've, higher growth rates and all of that. But when it comes to bilateral policies, regional policies, they expect that India should be taking the lead. Similarly, for Nepal, one small little Himalayan kingdom, but suddenly their economy had taken off, despite political instability, despite many other issues. But their expectation from India haven't changed. Their overall perspective of the globe had changed, because their own role in the globe, in the region had changed. So they were not very happy being boxed in as South Asian neighbors anymore, because there's a global larger space that was unfurling for them. But on the other hand, for India, they continue to be the next door neighbor. And the next door neighbor, who we keep saying is very vital, very important, but when it comes to the brass tacks, we often see they're really not so vital. I mean, we haven't actually focused many of our issues on the neighborhood, and for right or wrong reasons, but that's something that we have to learn to accept. So, what I'm saying is the neighborhood first of 2014 to the neighborhood now, there's a vast sea change in terms of the state processes, state behavior, state expectations. We still have to grapple with those things, and neighborhood first, while, as I said, it's actually a great tool, we should have always, we've of course for a very brief time seen how, very, very brief about how neighborhood, we should be looking at it through a prism of being equal status and why are we not giving, all that happened. But in terms of a reference point, I think this has been something which has, in some ways, of course, brought dividends to us. We've been able to do things in the neighborhood which we've never done before. This is unprecedented, the kind of engagement that we enjoy in the neighborhood now. But that has not changed your expectations, your demands, your quarrels, your incessant complaints about Indian behavior. That continues. And that's surprising, because here you are telling yourself that you're a global player. If need be, I'll talk, if there's anybody interested, I'll also talk about how the neighborhood is extending from the Bay of Bengal to the Indo-Pacific, and how that's actually changed the whole matrix of how, especially Ukraine's actually made a big, reflection there in terms of who's siding with Russia or Ukraine or in the US-China platform. So we really can't box ourselves and look at every neighbor through only the neighborhood prism. The world's really opened up for all of us. But more importantly, and I think this is a statement which has come out from in the last few years very effectively, that neighborhood has a salience in our foreign policies than any other. We can be signing everything with US, and we can be whatever hostility with China right now, and other programs going on with lots of other global powers across. But the salience that neighbors have in terms of a policy undertaking is completely unprecedented. And I think that is something every political leader over the years in India is understanding, that we have to get things going. We have to give neighborhood a kind of space in our policies that we hadn't done earlier. And I think that's something which is very vivid and very evident as we speak. How do I see the neighborhood, and how does India look at the neighborhood? It's just, Just the other day we were, discussing this. There's a program that I do at my institutes on regional value chain, and I'll come to that a bit later again. But we were, discussing with Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. This was a platform that we have, and we discuss how all of us can kind of intermingle our economies, and I'll get into detail if anybody has any interest later. But lo and behold, in less than 3 months, we've seen Sri Lanka in this crisis. I mean, there was problems. We knew pandemic had hit them badly because of the tourism sector being badly affected. But one didn't realize that over the last, maybe especially for the last 2 years, that they were buying far more than they were able to sell. And I think that's been the crunch of the problem, that their foreign policy reserves really hit. And of course, and Professor Nalpat's here, who works so closely with China, we've seen that, we've always been pointing that out about how their effective policies with China has had trouble on the economy, which is true, but at the same time just saying that, so the point here is that the neighborhood will always be unreliable in some ways, will always continue to be in a state of fluidity in some ways. So right now, if I actually had somebody had to ask me that, who do you think we have the best equation with? First to mind comes Bhutan. First, I mean that's for me, and I always say if I was going to actually prioritize my neighborhood, I would actually say the Himalayan kingdom neighbors are far more critical to us than any of the others. Bhutan and Bangladesh. But I can tell you this much, Bangladesh is up for elections in about a year's time. And right now we enjoy probably the best relation that we've had with Bangladesh over the last 50 years. But I can say with a sense of responsibility that if the elections don't go well, we are here in trouble. So it's not going to be the stable, reliable neighbor. Similarly for Bhutan, as of now we have a very, very good, and Bhutan has always gone to town to say that the kind of GDP they enjoy, the gross natural happiness as they talk about, India has a huge contribution to that. But Bhutan also, as you know, has gone the democratic way, and we often meet at many of our neighborhood programs. Many of the people who emerging journalists and other academia, their think tanks are still very, very small in Mahana. It's still very typically owned by the government. As we know, we have a great equation with the royalty there, but that space is also changing, and I'm not terribly convinced that India is keeping up with the space of change that is happening in Bhutan. So while I would say as of now they're very stable, they're very reliable, for sure they're not going to be for long. Of course, Pakistan and Afghanistan really are the most unstable and unreliable. I mean, there's no two ways on that. They'll continue to be like this for a decade now, if not more. I don't see any changes happening. Unless it's a completely capital. And again, speaking on foreign policy is difficult. I mean, I keep saying that I'm, fortune teller. I can only look at facts and figures and give you an analysis. But the point here is if Pakistan, which has gone like this for the last 50 years, is unlikely to change. So I don't see a capitalistic change happening there. There'll always be the armed forces which are going to be, focused there. The only way the armed forces can get the budget for themselves, can maintain that importance when they have India as the enemy number one, which is, and when the global players also, surprisingly, US and many others, why just US, it's Russia, it's China, everybody is pretty quiet on that front. I mean, they're great friends of ours, but when it comes to Pakistan, I don't see any of them protesting or telling them to change their ways. So that's going to be, Afghanistan, as I said, we thought we were doing well. We never did think something as transformational as this would happen. From a country which was so friendly with us, we were doing all kinds of things, we managed a lot of cross-border work with them, but suddenly we actually don't even allow, I mean, if you, I'm not sure what Manipal is, but Delhi hospitals, Bengal hospitals are full of Afghan people, full, every hospital you went to, max, fortress. Now they're all empty. I mean, of course, there are other patients, that's not to say, but we get a lot of patients from the neighborhood. But Afghanistan used to send us huge numbers of patients. Now we don't go give visa to anyone. This is not to say Afghans are not falling sick, they still are. But because of the security issue, we are not giving them visas. So I keep thinking in the long term, what are policies for? Who are policies for? I mean, is it only tuned to the President and the Prime Minister? No, it's not. It's for the people, right? So right now, just because we are upset about a government, we don't consider them a government because we think they're terrorists, which is absolutely true. But why are we taking our anger out on somebody else. And this is going to come and bite us again. That's my whole positioning on the neighborhood, is that we are not able to think through a lot of things. Of course, there are many complexities. It's very difficult to catch up everything in a few minutes of talk here. But I'm just saying that, there is no black and white in foreign policy, especially in the neighborhood. I mean, there's always too many layers and too many onion peels that really come about. But following from the Afghanistan example, I think the one core issue we understand in the neighborhood is that if your core concern, which is security, is addressed, then India is ready to lay out the red carpet. So that is something we've understood. I mean, this is going to stay stable always. This policy is not going to change. So whether we're discussing Bhutan, we're discussing Bangladesh, the fact that we have such strong, stable relationship with them is because they completely understand India's core concerns of security. And the fact that, as I said, today Bangladesh and India are the most stable partners. We've done much more than what Indira Gandhi and Mujibur Rahman in a very short period of time had a vision for the bilateral, but now we've been able to implement that. It's simply because this particular Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, addressed our security concerns. And similarly for Bhutan. There are fears now because China is making very strong inroads despite no official space there. But the fact that they understand that what hurts us. So the minute we know that they are addressing that, we are ready to. So the kind of developmental projects, developmental infrastructure support that we've given to Bhutan and Bangladesh is unprecedented. Because we think that they understood our core concerns, which many of our other neighbors don't, and as we speak, they still continue to be so. So that is one factor which is continuing to work for us. Of course, over the years, we've understood that, domestic factors also play everywhere. I mean, just now when we are speaking, while it's okay for me to be kind of sanitized and talk about Sri Lanka here, but if I was going to talk about this particular issue in Chennai today, my tone would be different. Because what is happening in Sri Lanka is imposing, has a direct influence, because you have families there, you have a day-to-day interaction there. So your whole equation goes, and this is something that is very typical to foreign policy, especially in India. And I think this is something that most of our neighbors are not able to understand, that India has, by a very easy count, at least 20 Indias which is influencing our domestic policies. So what Pakistan we are undergoing, their effect in the North India has a different ball game to what is considered in Manipal. I mean, we can again be very sanitized about Pakistan sitting here, but I can't do that when I'm sitting in Punjab. Similarly with Bengal, and I think that, we've seen there has been differences also, center state on many of these policies, but the domestic issues are becoming far graver, and also within the neighbors. Within the neighbors, earlier all foreign policies were at that level, Prime Minister, President, other leadership, there was bureaucracy being in touch. But right now we've seen that the impact how foreign policies do is much larger beyond the official tranche. There is a whole lot of world which has an impact, and every government has to factor that in. And I think that is something which is not the case earlier. Earlier it was much more simpler to say, okay, we think they did wrong for us, let's deal with it like that. So right now, as we see, there is a kind of a churning going on in every neighborhood, and that is impacting on the neighborhood. And I'll also talk about how the extra regional players are impacting on the neighborhood, and of course, China is a case in point here. But another very interesting that's happened in India's foreign policy is how India now talks about regionalism. For years, and having been a student of international politics, having watched, the policies very closely, I can say for certainty, though there were SAARC and there were other regional organizations, India always preferred the bilateral route. Their work preference was always through the bilateral route. Which, if you asked a neighbor, which is the other way around, they always wanted a larger regional platform. It is only now that India has realized that even though bilateral route is easier, it's direct, we are able to get through a lot of issues, but if it works for them, let's try the regional platform. So, in fact, I would actually say it was in 2010 that first realization came to India that in South Asia, the regional platform actually is something that everybody else is happy to belong to. So if you want to make yourself effective, if you want to make yourself a willing partner to what they want from you, then you have to go to the regional route. Of course, as we speak, and again, if you wish, I can take time to discuss SARC and BIMSTEC and other regional routes that we are discussing. But it's something that we've started. So beginning with cross-border transfer linkages, a lot of infrastructure we're building both with all the neighbors, especially Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan. We think that there's a possibility that we'll be able to build kind of a growth corridor, as we say it, which has larger ramification in terms of economics and political engagement. But again, I would actually hasten to add that while I do talk about regional route, it's still very, very nascent. And it was in 2015 that we actually had signed a Motor Vehicle Agreements Act amongst Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. It's only 2 months ago in 2022 that we actually signed the MOU to make it effective. So 7 years we wasted for what? Because we didn't understand each other. Very specific example, let me spend a little more time to give you why I keep saying the shadows are so important. So I've been part of many of these track tours, so we've been part of the discussion, and I've always heard our Bhutan partners saying, oh no, the environment issues, no, your trucks can't come in, they're very fussy about a lot of that. Bangladesh would be telling us, oh, it's just the truckers lobby, there are mafia working there. There's a mafia working everywhere. So it's not only Bhutan, really. Bangladesh's truckers lobby is larger mafia, if you ask me. So, that's always there. But whenever I would tell, because the Indian government has sent me for these talks, right? And I'm saying that Bhutan is very reluctant. They'll say, oh, forget it. We know how to overcome them. Oh, no, don't worry. It's okay. You do whatever you have to do from India's point of view. Don't worry about Bhutan. But we had to worry about Bhutan because they didn't sign. So when we speak just now, it's only Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. So obviously there's a problem somewhere which we don't understand. And here we were talking about a cargo movement, we were talking about passenger movement. We were up in arms amongst all of us. I'm just saying that this is to say that we don't read signals well. They are always in a point of demand from us, and we are not able to convince them that what we are saying is good for them. And that's something again in foreign policy, and again nobody likes me for saying this. For very long, India would always tell them that I know what's good for you, so let's do this. It's only now that we stop to think, we look back and we say, okay guys, you tell me what you want and we'll deliver that. That is a new change in Indian foreign policy again. And I must hasten to add here that, Indian foreign policy again, the political leaders are always in a position to be much more positive and forthcoming. But bureaucracy is everywhere, and it's just not Indian bureaucracies hold you back, because they'll tell you, guys, you haven't seen the file which I've worked on for the last 3 years. You just here for your constituency, right? So you can say that, okay? And it's, I'll give an example of Afghanistan. When Afghanistan was invited into SARC, we were in some kind of talks, and I remember specific people in the government dealing with foreign policy were so upset. But how could you do this? How could they come into SARC? I mean, for a variety of reasons. Not only because of sense of geography, but a variety of reasons. So I'm just saying that often what political leaders on every neighbor is trying to push is often held back. And which brings me to the second point here, I think my 9th or 10th point, whatever, is that when we are discussing foreign policy, especially now, it's no more the sole fiefdom of the external affairs or the foreign affairs or whatever you call it. Right now, if you see, there are a whole lot of, so at a different level, I think the media is undertaking policies of their own, which has certainly a large outreach to the people. So a lot of people who have very little understanding of foreign policy, because MEA's job is not to go door to door and explain their policies. Media is explaining it rightly, wrongly, indifferently, fictitiously to people, with people accepting, and that you'll have people up on their arms about it, and this is happening across the board. It's not only India I'm talking about. This is true for Nepal media, this is true for Bangladesh, this is true for Sri Lanka. Some time ago, this was exactly a year ago, we had signed an agreement with Sri Lanka on some Western cargo terminal. They didn't give it to us. On what excuse? That, oh, there was a local protest. that how can we give this eastern terminal, so fine, don't take the eastern, the other way around, don't take the western, we'll give you the eastern, which was a less strategic point of view and all of that. The point here is, in Sri Lanka, those people have been on the roads always. Every time they've signed up with the project with China, the Sri Lankans have come on the road. But they did not take that into cognition. It is only when it suited them they took that into cognition. So there is also that kind of underplay that keeps happening. Another thing that I've never been able to understand this, that what happens here is, your foreign minister or your prime minister has gone and promised something to a neighbor. Soon after you'll find your home minister, and this is a specific reference to India, you'll find him contradicting that. So we've actually seen in the last few years the prime ministers officially gone ahead and told the prime ministers, whose particular case we're discussing here, that guys, this is not against you, we will address your concerns. So this is cross purposes already. So every time I'm in the neighborhood, I'm always bulldozed with questions like that. That what does it actually mean? What do you mean? I mean, I'm so hesitant to say that even I don't know what it means. I honestly don't know what it means. I mean, when your prime minister is saying something that this is one country who's our best friends forever, and your home minister goes and contradicts him in some forum or the other, what is the signal that you're doing? And this is also true for other countries, and I'm here discussing India, so I'm focusing more on India, but I'm saying this is also true for our neighbors. So, there is that constant shadows, as I started with, that you have to constantly see how that is. Also, what we've seen over the years is that right now, as we see, the neighborhood is so unreliable in the sense of the political instability that they're facing. It's not something that we can actually predict, understand, or so it always we have to deal with ad hoc. There was a time a year or so back, our relationship with Sri Lanka was very, very how would I say, intermittent. We of course have a free trade agreement and all of that was working, but our political differences were very, very wide. It was widening. But this crisis happened. And they realized, of course, they are discussing IMF bailout. IMF bailout means a lot of contours, a lot of parameters in place, which I'm not sure the government can keep up to. But there's no government to speak of as we now speak. There's an interim government which is coming in. So, but they've also reached out to India. And I remember this even before the political crisis, there was a change happening when the Sri Lankan ambassador came to Delhi. He reached out to us at our institute, came to speak to us, and we all kept staring at each other that this is not the Sri Lanka we know. They were so receptive, they were so, so there was also a change going on there too in terms of how that we've sidelined India, we've tried to, and let me close it by saying here, this whole thing about how we feel our neighbors have not been cognizant of our security concerns, have sidelined us in many of the projects. I'm talking the role of the extra-regional players. Earlier, whenever I used to discuss extra-regional players, I would also discuss US and I would discuss Russia. But right now, in the neighborhood, the one actor which is predominant, to say, I in fact often say that it's a non-resident South Asian actor, it's China. So, everywhere, and I remember there was just pre-pandemic, just before, shutdown happened, I was in Colombo for a conference. And we were discussing Indo-Pacific and other factors, but of course, me being Indian, the China factor keeps playing. And I talked about how the China was affecting Colombo's economy and how, I was looking at, they have a port city project. It's a very interesting project. It's like a building a town with a port. So we were saying in terms of the numbers, with their own economists had given, it's all in the public domain. It doesn't somehow sound right. No economist, but little at that I understand that what is it that you get out of putting in so much of money? If you're not looking at viability, large-term projects mean viability of longish term. But even then, how do you see your port city projects giving you that? And I remember, that particular, meeting that we had in Colombo, they just shut me down completely saying, oh, this is typical India speaking and, all of that. But see what happens subsequently. It's not, again, if you actually look at Sri Lanka, the unraveling that's taken place, maybe China's contribution is about 10%, then 90% other factors, but China is. But surprisingly again, with Bangladesh, China has been able to manage it differently. So Bangladesh, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Colombo, if you look out, if you are any of these hotels which is overlooking the ocean front, early first thing in the morning, if you look out, you'll only find Chinese workers going up and down. There's nobody else there on the road. And subsequently, along in the evening, there's a particular time, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, they're all returning back to their work. In Bangladesh, every project that you go to, you will not find a Chinese face, though they are funded by Bangladesh, China. So, there are different ways that each country is handled. In Nepal, suddenly we've seen how Nepal has been given the dream that you have been going to connect it to the, China through Tibet and all of that. Some, in fact, friends tell us, and I'm sure Professor Malpad knows much more about this, that actually China can make that dream a reality. We in India still think that entire infrastructure is difficult. We've also seen how China has, we've always, in fact, have this very common fallacy that China delivers all the time. If China tells you they're going to give you a project in May, they actually do it in April. They've done that many times over, which is why the way they function is different. And we often have used that. But one particular highway that we're building, Kathmandu, which is outlined, one of those, they delayed it by 3 years. This obviously created a lot of, thing in Kathmandu especially. But Kathmandu again, I'm not talking the hills, I'm not talking the Tarai region, has a very, very specific India tone, anti-Indian tone. And many of us always believe that Chinas are there. The reason, and I don't agree to that actually, because I think far before China came in, the hill people had this, the Kathmandu people, the capital people had a different take on, because they've always said that, and this is a fact I'm going to close it here with, that India is interfering with us. Always, whether it's the election, whether it's their machinations going on within their own domestic political parties or everything. And again, go with me when I say this. I've been sitting there, I've watched these countries happen. They want us to interfere. They will come to us before election, say, guys, help me do this. Help me get that constituency. And this is across at least 3-4 neighbors that we have in the neighborhood. They want us to interfere, but when something doesn't work to their favor, then India becomes a demon. So this is something that they want, because again, we know the kind of interaction that we have with Nepal. The families are interlinked. I mean, all of us have friends and families and all of that in Nepal, in Bangladesh. That there's a constant engagement in many ways. But this whole interference tag is because they wanted us to interfere. We didn't offer to help you guys, but because we know the political leaders so well, because we know many of these people who are engaged with the policies, we said, okay, we'll pick up the phone and talk. But the minute you picked up the phone and talk, and you didn't win that particular way, then they said, oh, you gave the other ones so much of money. So this is a problem that India is continuing to grapple with. Elections are coming in Bangladesh, it's going to be really interesting, because everybody I know is coming to India for some help. Either I want that constituency, or I want that particular funding, or I want you to tell the so-and-so there that, this is how it should go. So you want you want India to be part of this, processes that's taking place, but at the same time, you can't stop critiquing India. I really don't know how much of time I'll have, but if I should close in here, or do you want me to get into a bit of detailing with the South Asian neighbors in terms of nation, bilateral, or shall I close it in? I continue? Okay. So, let me not focus too much on Pakistan and Afghanistan. As I said, I'm no fortune teller, so I won't be able to say things. But I do understand that we are not able to work with Pakistan and Afghanistan bilaterally. We are not able to get through. We've tried every which way. I think no Prime Minister has put in the kind of effort Prime Minister Modi did in terms of engaging with Pakistan, wanting to engage with Pakistan. We've seen how Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had tried also. But we also know there's a large constituency, as I referred to earlier, the defense forces, the army especially, will not allow that to happen. So right now we of course have another Prime Minister who's given the right noises about India. But the very fact, and I find it astonishing that how a neighbor we actually have a border with, and I'm aware of the JNK and the Kashmir issue, but even that issue apart, the fact that, all of you, I'm sure, Coke Studio, our most favorite Coke studio was Pakistan, right? Every concert we didn't want to miss was a Pakistani guy. We are not able to do any of that, which I think is not going to work in our favor ever. Because decades from now, none of us are going to be here, but the memories always remain. Just like good memories remain. This is 50 years of India and Bangladesh, so I've been back and forth in Bangladesh, and the kind of positive revelation that's happening is fabulous because they remember what India did. But I also go to Nepal very frequently, and I also go to other neighbors, and every time they will tell you all those incidents of things that India did not do for you. And bad memories stay far longer, especially when they're state memories. Personally, you can tell somebody, guys, let's move out, let's be positive. All of these talks that happen on TV these days, let's think differently. But state memories is always the negative memories which hold out actually. That's not going to go. So I'm very, very concerned that we have to find a way of working with Pakistan. Not because it's good for Pakistan, but because it's good for me. And whenever I'm doing a policy, whenever I'm doing anything, my core interest is my own national interest. And I say this to everyone in the neighborhood, that it doesn't matter what a good partner, what a friendly neighbor you go with me, but if my own national interest is not served, why would I do business with you? So similarly, I think the way we are looking at Pakistan, right now it's impossible to deal with Afghanistan, but again I have lots of reservations that why are we not making a difference between people of Afghanistan and this rogue government in Afghanistan. We have to learn to, have a clean line with them. So that's going to pinch us. But let's look at Nepal and Bhutan. Again, as I said, two very, very favored. But Nepal, of course, as I said, has often been, and Tarai, because a lot of people from India have settled there and vice versa. Our connection with Tara is much more deeper than our connection with Kathmandu and the hills. The hill people are relatively indifferent to politics in Nepal, not so for the other countries, but in Nepal. So, but at the same time, I think the unique relationship we enjoy with Nepal, there are no two examples globally about the kind of borders which are open, the kind of family interactions we have. I have Nepali colleagues working at PIF. We don't think she's a foreigner. We think she's an Indian citizen. So that is possible only with Nepal. But at the same time, when we are not able to, there's a particular agreement that we had signed with them on Pancheshwar Dam, maybe 20 years ago. We are still talking about it. And I know the difficulties that Nepal has in terms of addressing it, and every government that comes, I mean, it's a kind of quagmire that is happening now. Every few months the equation changes from one to the other. But we've not been able to get our things straight. Of course, we've been able to do oil pipeline, which is fabulous. It was the first time ever in history of India's foreign policy in the neighborhood, we delivered something before time. So this is the new India that you're dealing with actually, where we are able to keep our promises that we deliver, which is not, the earlier India was always about making excuses. Oh, that didn't happen because you didn't give me that, or so-and-so didn't allow me that, or that, the project didn't get signed. Even now the company is enough because, as I said, we've probably given the largest lines of credit ever to anybody, which is Bangladesh, which is close to 9 billion. But in actual terms, I think about 4 billion has been used. India will tell you about all the project problems that we are not able to give them the rest of the funds, and Bangladesh will tell you just the contrary as to why we are not. So Bangladesh is supposed to sign an agreement on Bangla and Chittagong, which gives us access to Northeast. Some of you, I don't know whether you listen to my Northeast the book discussion. I focus on this because Northeast is a gateway to neighborhood now. It's a huge, huge way in terms of getting regionalism impact upon. But we are not as yet able to, because Bangladesh government told me that they actually don't have a detailed project report. So they don't know that whether it's benefiting who. You're going to put in funds together, right? So how does the project actually affect us? So that's something that we haven't been able to get through. So there are lots of issues on those kind of front. One particular neighbor, I'm sorry I seem to have missed out on my speaking, is Myanmar. Oh, one of the most fascinating countries I've watched, and I watched so closely. So we have a project called Karadam Multi-Modal Project with them. I don't know when it was signed, 2010, 15, whatever it was. It's still nowhere. And the whole logic of having signed that project at that point of time, we actually discussed this way earlier, 2001, 2002, because Bangladesh had a particular government who was very, very against India. I mean, everything we tried to work with Bangladesh, it didn't happen. So we needed, as I said, we needed mainland access to Northeast through either Myanmar or Bangladesh. And we thought Myanmar was a safe bet. And that's when the Karadam multimodal came out, because we have direct contracts with them through Manipal, through Mizoram, and through Nagaland also. we signed that project not understanding that the particular capital, then of course it was different, now it's Naypyidaw, that what Naypyidaw tells you is not necessarily what the rest of Myanmar thinks. Because the kind of small, how should I say, the ethnic population, especially on the border, are very different and don't think, and right now of course there's a military government in place, we don't, the people of Myanmar don't accept it. There's only a regime which insists that this is a legitimate government. There's an opposition government in place which we don't accept. So it's a really complex thing going on. But again, we've not publicly denounced what is happening except for saying that we want democracy, we want stability, simply because Myanmar government that time was able to address our core concerns of security. So if we see that Northeast is stable today, if we see the kind of transport and other infrastructure projects that we are able to undertake in the Northeast, is simply because Myanmar and Bangladesh gave us that support. And it would not have been possible. So we are very hesitant to, to take that away. But I have, I would say, lacuna in the sense that I really don't know what's on the ground. We keep visiting, but it's very different from what actually the government officials are saying. I've often said, suppose we did not support the government, the military government, what would be the security parameters for us? Because we know in Myanmar, the borders that connect us, which is Nagaland. And their Nagaland is fascinating actually. It's kilometers and kilometers of farmlands. You don't see a soul anywhere. So if you have to actually reach, which we tried to reach at some point of time, it took us 2 days, and it was a difficult, walk, ride, stretches. There's a very little government establishment, but their families are getting married into each other's. There's a whole lot of barter system taking place even today as we speak in terms of the agro products. So, but none of the governments interfere with that. Nor does India interfering, nor does the state government interfering, nor does Myanmar interfere. So that's gone on very good. On the Mizoram front, we've actually signed a MOU with Bangladesh, which is a kind of a crisscross that we have to open up a custom house there. But what they think and what we think is completely different. Even today we are discussing that with Mizoram we'll be able to sign that, but because again the ethnic population there are so happy with what is going on that they don't want any of this. Similarly for our Mizoram, I would say actually, they just not interested. They have enough to eat, they have exactly what they want to see. Thanks to internet, everybody is connected with what the entertainment you want. So they don't, and my book on the Northeast is actually about that what we think for Northeast is not what Northeast thinks for themselves. While I continue to argue that Northeast is my core and gateway to many of my neighbors, at the same time we have to actually see that why we should not use Northway as a gateway, as a transit, but we should actually make Northeast a stakeholder in many of our policies. Unfortunately, given the processes right now, they're still not in the stakeholder process. But coming back to Myanmar, so the one trading point is actually very functional, used on a daily basis, is between Manipur and More and Tamil. I have a very funny picture where I'm actually shaking hands with the government officer saying, I'd come to meet him and saying bye to me. And right behind me, and whoever took the photograph from his office obviously didn't notice, the truck which is full of all these illegal products, which is like, the rice cookers, your fancy mattresses, colorful stuff, which all comes in through the More-Tamil border into India, none of it which is manufactured in Myanmar. But obviously third country, which is China in this case. So while our official trade is actually really minimal, especially the border trade, unofficially it's huge. So we've still not been able to, put our things together. So even today, and I keep saying our Northeast leaders actually have far greater access to the ethnic population in Myanmar, I don't think we use them enough. So right now we are keeping quiet. We in fact, of course, to kind of signaling a strong message, our foreign minister also went along with our army chief to Myanmar to prove, say that guys, we are with you on this. But at the same time, if you're not looking at transformational states, the long-term consequences are very high. So that's something we have to consider in terms of Myanmar. And again, one very, very fascinating. Again on Myanmar, and this is something, we recently had a summit meeting on BIMSTEC, which is one of the things, and I'm closing with regionalism here, that for long we know South Asia as South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, which is SARC. So even today, outside India, anybody talks about regionalism in South Asia, they talk about SARC. But we also understand that SARC was not possible because of the way Pakistan behaved with us. It's impossible to work with somebody who's bombing at you and being every terrorist possible. So it's impossible. So we obviously moved out from SARC in the sense that we didn't want to, we tried. And I think again this is 2014 or I think 2015 that Prime Minister Modi did was called the BIMSTEC leaders to a kind of a site meeting on BRICS in Goa and said, let's get BIMSTEC moving because regionalism is here to stay, because if we are not having a common voice, we are not able to take that through. But having studied, having written on the fact of soft power, I'm totally convinced that there is no such thing as soft power. The only power that actually works is hard power. And if regionalism is something that we are going to work on, if regionalism is something that we believe that we are going to take us forward, because again, if what is happening in Indo-Pacific we see, and it's not only Quad that we are discussing, that you have to put your minds together. So unless we have a security framework in place in regionalism, which is something that we've avoided always, because we always say that's a hard road, let's not go there. Let's go soft road, Buddhism, let's do culture, let's do Tagore. No, it doesn't work, because that works at a very, very soft level. But when it comes to actually intertwining your economies, your political system, it is only hard power. And till we are able to do that, I think in the neighborhood it's always going to be policy underway. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the very informative talk. I actually have two major questions for you. You spoke about a regional value chain, and I would like you to expand on that in the context of South Asia. And you, in the end of your talk, also you talked about a security architecture that should be placed in South Asia. So, what kind of contours would you suggest that security architecture have? Can I ask one more? You also spoke about the extension of the neighborhood from the Bay of Bengal or the Indian Ocean region to the Indo-Pacific. So how do you see that happening, or what are the changes that come with it? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so another point I missed out on discussing, that the economies in South Asia is not interdependent. Because India has not invested enough. Primarily so. Again, it's a new thing that has started, but more because we are not able to actually complement each other. We supplement, our economies supplement each other. So the regional value chain project was something that I undertaken about 2 years ago again because of pandemic. So the idea was, if you look at, let's say, ready-made garments, Bangladesh is leading in ready-made garments in terms of the exports to the world. So is India. India's an Indian industry. So is Sri Lanka, one of the leaders again of the ready-made garment industry. Especially, there are different categories under the ready-made garment. Bangladesh is on 5 particular category very high compared to any of the other countries. But even Pakistan is actually very good. So while we are not discussing Pakistan, the idea was that all these 3 countries are selling to, say, Marks and Spencer's, J.C. Penney, to Walmarts. So I said, why not? There are certain sectors that you are not so strong on. Why not we get together on those sectors, get together. So what I said was, Nepal has enough land to offer in terms of, setting up, because we've got economic zones that we are working on right now. We can do that. So if India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh set up a factory in Nepal. So Nepal contributes to the regional value chain of building a particular ready-made garment industry. This is a very basic example I'm giving you, there are much more nitty-gritties to it. Say they give the land, and Bangladesh has surplus in terms of manpower. So that's why they're also able to sell their products. at a rate that none of us can match because of the manpower. So they give us the manpower, and the best linen is actually available in Sri Lanka and India. So we give the raw material. So this is another argument we've said all the time, that this entire GDP growth that Bangladesh is seeing through the ready-made garment industry, which contributes largely to the sustained growth rate, is because of this huge export, which they buy from us in terms of all the raw products. So whether it's zips, whether it's buttons, whether it's lining, whether it's raw cotton which they put in their loom, it's a lot of the raw stock. Now they've of course been able to buy from other countries at a slightly cheaper rate, and also they produce a lot of their own linen just now. Linen as a cloth here I'm referring to, the linen of course is a subset of that. So we were discussing why we can't do that, which will help us negotiate better with those companies. So we kind of do a cartel. The mafia that I'm working against, I'm trying to actually build a mafia. Honestly, if I put it simply. It's like that we have leveraging our strength. So the one thing that we actually tried in the past, and it's been tried again, Northeast has a lot of agro products and horti products, a lot of horticultural stuff. So their bamboo is actually fabulous. It's being sold to a whole lot of globally, it goes. But because of the climatic issues, terrain problems, manpower problems in Northeast, many of their products are not being used. So you have pineapples which are just lying on the road and just being spoiled in that sense, a huge amount. So that's something. There's a particular company in Bangladesh who's very well known for its the juices and their jams, and it's flooded a lot of Indian markets. I don't know whether it's come to Manipal. It's called Pram. So their juices and their potato wafers and all of that is fabulous. So Pram had about 20 years ago come to Agartala. Again, I remember being part of at that point of time. But for some odd reason it didn't work. Now they've come back again, reopened a factory. Where the point here is, so they buy the products, agro products from India, and sell with Indian support in terms of the factory support to abroad. I mean, that's where they market it. They have a huge market abroad, especially the Middle East countries. So whether we could tap on that. So here on regional value chain, we were discussing 2-3 products like that. Of course, there are many other industrial goods we could look at. There are many other, like bicycle. Bicycle parts export from India is huge. So why are we not able to put it together? And whether to Myanmar, whether to Nepal, whether to Sri Lanka. So these are, but again, I found a lot of problems. This is really at our kind of research study level, but to take it to another level, even there was hesitancy from Sri Lanka, there was hesitancy of Bangladesh. Bilaterally, they would tell us, that doesn't mean well. I mean, this is about the first 5 of us that we were discussing. So that's something that we are trying. What Pran is doing with Northeast is not regional value chain really in the sense of, it's like setting up a factory doing that. But it's possible that we are able to, Bangladesh and Northeast has a lot of products in common, agro products, which again, like jackfruit. So which like in South, jackfruit chips and all that is so common. So I said, why don't we try that there? It's possible that we use it. So this is something basically that one particular country has a niche in one particular, either the product or the knowledge system or the capacity, and the others come in terms of supporting that. So that's what is simply put a regional value chain, which it's a way, I mean still a work in progress in the South Asian context. What did you talk about? Security being So the security framework in South Asia is on the BIMSTEC, I would like to say, is all of us agree, and again China I think is something that's always there in the back of our minds, that all of us agree on the parameters that we are going to address your core security concerns. Just like I expect Sri Lanka not to do anything which is going to, and we were very, very wary, and we still are, about the kind of port facilities that China was being given, the kind of access to things they were given, and I didn't talk about Maldives at all in this case. Right now Maldives, with this particular president, we are on a very stable footing, but the government changes we are unlikely to have, because we saw how China came in very strongly in Maldives, and we were again doing a lot of fabulous projects there, which we felt were going to work against our interests. So I'm just saying right now at the BIMSTEC level, we've done a lot of good work in terms of, we've got this center in Gurgaon which basically predicts weather changes, climate change in terms of your naval movement and other things. We are able to warn everybody. So it's like now it's kind of rotation that they have their own officials also with us, and we're trying to do more such a soft area kind of thing. Also, we tried something in education. We tried South Asian University, which is functioning, but if not in the context we had thought South Asia SARC University would work. I'm told Pakistan doesn't. Every country had promised to put in some annual funds, which I'm told that Pakistan didn't go by the promises. But otherwise, in terms of the students coming in from the country, Afghanistan and everything, it's fabulous. It's actually quite interesting place. South Asian University. It's very close to my office, so we do a lot of interaction with them actually. So it's quite, but the template is different. So we actually try to think of a BIMSTEC university. But again, I'm saying these are very soft. And so if you go around, and just because I'm talking to you, you know what BIMSTEC is, but I'm absolutely convinced that if I went around, everybody would know what SARC is, BIMSTEC. Nobody, even in Bangladesh, just recently we were doing something and I said BIMSTEC. So this was a group, for our talks, no layman comes, right? Somebody's interested, who's aware of it. That gentleman actually got up and said, I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand what BIMSTEC is. So then I had to explain. So BIMSTEC still is not there on a national kind of, radar. So I'm just saying that given the fact of our problems with the, Afghanistan, Pakistan just now, SARC is really no gainer. I can't see it moving. So if BIMSTEC is going to move, so there has to be, we've always been in SARC, we've always been scared of discussing security, so we discussed, we wanted to only talk about trade and economic relationship. SARC is actually impinged on SAPTA, which is the, preferential and then free trade agreement. My take is just the other way around. Your free trade and your other economic engagements will come about if you have your core political parameters in place. So if I'm not able to sign up with you and say that I will myself, I can't answer for my, non-state actors. So there's always going to be some excuse of everybody, we didn't do it, but the non-state actors did it. But generally, if the governments agree, while verbally they all agree, but in terms of signing up to say that yes, let's have an MOU to address each other's concerns. So you actually have a hotline that, okay, I think there's this problem on the borders from your country. Like I'm just saying in Tamil Nadu, we've had these fishermen issues and all of that. We don't look at it through a security prism because we don't think they're out to do a security challenge us. But at the same time, we are always wary that some possibilities maintain. So if that at a certain level, I'm not saying signing a MOU takes, delivers. There will be issues, but let's begin with that and then the other things will fall in place. We thought let's avoid contradictions, let's avoid confrontations, let's go the easy way out, which I'm sorry to say it hasn't really worked for me, so that's fine. Okay, so neighborhood, yeah, very interesting. I'm actually looking at Indo-Pacific in ways how the South Asia has actually reacted. There are a number of them who worked with the Council, the UN veto, some who haven't, some who abstained. So there's a much larger game on in terms of what your equation, not with Ukraine, but how you're actually looking at Russia, at China, at US. So this whole thing, so the other day I actually met with somebody from the US State Department who was telling me that they have a feeling that Bangladesh did not support, which was the UN proposed, UN resolutions against Russia, because US has been pretty, tough on them recently. They've got, they have a route which is basically an anti-terror security group, and they sanctioned saying that guys, what you're doing is not acceptable. So some of you whose children are actually studying in US, please take them back. So these are the individual sanctions they did. They had a democracy summit conference which they do annually. They didn't invite Bangladesh. So those kind of things are happening. But at the same time, Bangladesh also realizes that it's important to keep these people with you. So right now, this whole, if you remember when Quad was getting a bit active, and for the first time India was using the term Quad and talking about they moved from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific terminology. Suddenly out of the blue, and I remember the Chinese ambassador, who's usually they used to be very quiet, now they're suddenly, being far more, I would say, vocal about it, said that there is no way that you're going to sign up for Quad. Quad by itself is a copyright, so obviously you're going to open up. But this is again one of the advisors to the government, foreign ministry of Bangladesh,
who was sitting, if I'm not mistaken, in London and said that we are very happy to be part of the Indo-Pacific. So they are part of Indian Ocean region cooperation. That's another configuration that India is also part of. So this whole Indo-Pacific strategic construct, which has now come out for the last 2 or 3 years now, so they have expressed their willingness to be part of it in the official construct way. And the US again, there were a couple of state visits, high-level visits to Bangladesh, who said that we are very much, all these other parameters in place, we want you to be part of that. While again China, so there is a lot more which is happening. Sri Lanka again is of course Bay of Bengal because a lot of our cargo moves through their waters, and we use their port. In fact, I often argue that their Colombo port, actually I think 60% of the cargo is Indian cargo there, so or more, right? So there obviously everybody who has a stake in terms of that. So that is now. So none of us want China to be, of course, engaging with the neighbors too much. But at the same time, we are very clear who our friends are. We are doing business with everybody. But I think that's something, a new thing that's come up in India, that you can also talk to US and you can also be, being friends with China. We are not friends with China right now, that's a different matter. But I'm sure if a situation came, and again there's a lot of controversy going on here, and I'm not sure how much that is true, that we've always thought in China everything was from bottom to top, or top to bottom, whichever. There is now kind of, some writing, some narrative happening that maybe President Xi is not so much with the BLA. I don't know whether this is true, Professor Nalpa sitting and you would understand that better. But again, we are seeing that we are making our choices clear. So that's something which is happening in Indo-Pacific in terms of all these neighbors who have way of being and access is a natural extension to Indo-Pacific now. So those equations, the way they handle the big powers are also how you examine the neighborhood. Way long, but I hope that's clarified.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for the very insightful lecture. I'm Nini Sindhuja, I'm a second year student here. So, ma'am, I had 2 questions. The first one was, if India actually realized the importance of multilateral platforms, considering the importance of Bay of Bengal region, why is BIMSTEC having a very slow progress? And what are the factors that is hindering India from actively pursuing the BIMSTEC initiatives, especially with regard to BIMSTEC FTA and all other things? And the second question is regarding a statement that I read recently. It said that India is pursuing a competitive regionalism. India's policy is actually competitive regionalism that India is pursuing to BIMSTEC to put pressure on SAARC. So if you could just help me understand that phenomenon of competitive regionalism in terms of BIMSTEC. Thank you.
So on BIMSTEC, if you look at the countries, you have 5 South Asian and 2 Southeast Asian. So it's Myanmar and Thailand. Another problem with regionalism always, with SAARC, I've always argued my case like this, is that what works for Nepal can't work for Sri Lanka because your economies are different, your whole needs and requirements are different. Similarly, right now, when we're discussing BIMSTEC, Myanmar and Bangladesh have serious political differences because of this whole large population called Rohingyas being thrown out of Myanmar. They have found place in Bangladesh. They are bursting. I've been to some of the camps, not all, the plenty of camps in Chittagong area. But it's there are huge political differences. Right now, I would actually say that India is the only one who's supporting BIMSTEC in that sense. India is trying to keep that flag going. But again, we said that at very informal levels, and I'm not sure how much that's possible, that India needs to infuse it with far larger funds to keep that whole momentum going. Unlike SAARC, where there used to be an annual summit, there is no such thing at BIMSTEC. In fact, it's only now that the BIMSTEC charter has been adopted. So maybe there will be some kind of, parameters in place in terms of that, okay, so annually you got to do this. And again, the BIMSTEC secretariat, which again was on demand, based in Bangladesh. I have again a lot of reservations about that. I was editing a book on Bangladesh, on BIMSTEC some time ago. And I realized the secretariat offers you absolutely no information. So we actually, because VIF is one of the, there are about a few think tanks who kind of take lead positions. We are their security dialogue think tank, which has been given to us from the government of India. And we said that we will take over in terms of updating the website, in terms of everything that's written on BIMSTEC or Bay of Bengal or something like that. Anyway, that's not happened. That the point is that there is some kind of a limited energy. Also because, as I said, that everybody has lots of challenges going on, and the countries here that Thailand, Myanmar. Thailand is far more stable for this point of time. Myanmar has not been in a position to kind of. They are very happy. So in fact, at this summit, when they came, there were a lot of questions about it. That how you got in an army, army who's been ousted the previous elected government and took over to be a legitimate government and representing Myanmar. We said that's the government in place. We are going to talk to them. So we kind of bulldoze the rest of the people, the states, to keep quiet and get Myanmar there. So right now there's too much of political ups and downs there. And also even on regionalism, I'm actually of the opinion that sub-regionalism is going to be far more effective, simply because even if I discuss Thailand, Thailand has very little what Nepal has. So Nepal Bhutan is part of BIMSTEC again. So the Himalayan economies don't have anything with the Bay of Bengal economies. So what are we going to work on? Okay, so that's why we decided these soft mechanisms are going to be good, like weather, climate change. These are something which is affecting everybody. So having those centers, but again I think within BIMSTEC, like within SARC, you had a place for sub-regionalism, which is that BBR actually came from there. Which again, unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's not been effective as yet. We hope that we'll be able to drive through and take our cargo, and all of those are different matters. So even on BIMSTEC, it is very difficult to find. So that we say, we found Buddhism to be the only common factor. Nepal, Sri Lanka, everybody has Buddhist factor. But I mean, there's limitations to what Buddhism can do to you, because the way they understand Buddhism is very different from the way we understand Buddhism today. It's not the same, and for some of them it's part of their state religion, for some others it's not. But Buddhism is common true, and I tried that also earlier in my previous avatar, where I said that I called it the Buddhist connect. But again, it doesn't get you into a high frame subject. If it's not high frame, it's not at that level, then you're not going to be able to push through. So these are very BIMSTEC, I think, is flagging because there's not enough funds from each one to contribute to keep it going. There has to be some big ticket issues. So right now they signed I'm not sure the thing, but it's basically a transport agreement that they signed amongst all of them. But as I said, between India and Myanmar, we've not been able to get a bilateral transfer system in place as yet. I mean, there could be reasons enough. I mean, that's fine. But I always say this, that when you flunk your exam, your mom will tell you that don't give me reasons. You flunked and pay for it. So similarly for the government policies, you flunked, so pay for it. There are consequences when you're not able to deliver. So similarly for a lot of these projects, that there's a whole grandiose thing. So about, and that's where the other thing comes in, that China has this BRI or OBOR 121. All the other countries in the neighborhood is part of that. So, but India has individual bilateral, and we are all part of the Asian highway projects, all of us. Again, there's been very at intermittent level, each state has actually have their highway projects in place. In Northeast, a lot of these projects are in place. But that whole work to come together is going to take time. And that's something which we've not been able to do in BIMSTEC also. I mean, while you sign the transport linkages, but again at a bilateral level, a lot of transport connectivity you're discussing with Sri Lanka, but nothing's gone off the table as yet. It's all there at the discussion level. So at a multilateral level, the discussions are far more complicated. And that's something India will always tell you, that it's easy to, to get into the nitty-gritties, clear them out, sign it up and do at the bilateral level. Because at the multilateral level, too many people have too many issues, because issues are that much. But again, if you're looking at a larger grandiose world to move in, you need to look at multilateral. So that's again the whole comparative regionalism is something that they talked about, because I think this has been grossly misunderstood, that BBIM has always been seen as a competition to SARC, which is actually within the SARC charter, that you can do sub-regionalism and take this forward. So if any of this, this cross-border facility that India is developing with Bangladesh, with Nepal, with Bhutan, if they are able to take this forward, this could all feed into the larger BIMSTEC. So while the Kaladan isn't working, but your other transport facilities can work. So why are we not focusing on that? A problem also is that while Kaladan is required for India to kind of a presence there, which is necessary, and Myanmar has a very, very positive outlook toward India. I'm not about the government, but Myanmar as a nation, as a country, because people are very, very happy to deal with Indians, I mean, apart from the history and other factors. So there is that particular presence required, but if you know that this particular transport system is not going to be effective, because Bangladesh has now given you transshipment and transit, so your cargo movement is going to be limited. Why are we not discussing other bilateral? So we are discussing actually Thailand, Myanmar trilateral highway. The Thailand Myanmar highway is actually functional. Again, the India lab, which is again through ethnic mosaic there, is running into problems. So the problem here is that while we are discussing government to government interaction, at the ground, they are often population that we are not able to deal with. So that ethnic mosaic is something, and we've discussed at various levels that our northeast, even apart from political leaders, the population has far greater interaction with ethnic mosaic across Myanmar. But we've not been able to use that because we often think it's going to work against us. We don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that we've not been able to call that bluff as yet. But it's true that the government rebels for you on that front, on top of the Myanmar government here, and also with the ethnic mosaic. So actually, there's a misunderstanding. There is no competition. It's all part of the whole large cobweb of network of transport corridors and other economic models which will be part of it, which are known as economic corridors. But again, it's been very slow. It's been very intermittent, and every time there's some political issue. Right now, we're not building anything with Myanmar because of the political problems. But again, in the neighborhood, there are no easy answers. It's always going to be a work in progress. But once we tick off something, I mean, like I'm just saying that BIN gets ticked off, then it'll start expanding to a larger, and I'm very convinced 10 years from now, we'll talk about BIMSTEC in far more positive terms. But right now, I think the set of problems domestically in every BIMSTEC country is holding it back. And again, pandemic and other factors, there is not enough funding. You need huge amount of fund to invest in digitals. It doesn't happen on its own.
Good evening, my name is Kiran. I'm a second year student here in the department. First of all, thank you for that insightful lecture. I had two questions, part of which you did answer while answering the previous question. So you mentioned about how the ethnicity is like spread across the political borders. So don't you think having a bottom-down approach is better in involve and making them a better stakeholder will help in building up the relation? Second is again it's connected to the previous question. It's like you also mentioned about how there is border trade. It's either unadopted or it falls under the informal economy. So how is that playing a role there, and how can we utilize it to better the ties between these countries? Thank you.
Let me begin with border trade. I mean, while I am criticizing and I'm critiquing, and I think that's my job and that's what I enjoy doing, I must say that border trade has actually improved vastly with all our neighbors in recent times. Because we've been able to bring down a lot of our non-tariff barriers and tariff barriers. But again, if you look at it from their point of view, like I'll give you an example with Bangladesh, except for some products like alcohol and drugs or whatever, those kind of contraband stuff, everything Bangladesh can sell to us. But on the contrary, when it comes for us to sell goods to them, they have whole kind of tariff barriers. So like if you are able to sell, I'm just saying to make it easy, suppose I sell 1,000 goods to you, 1,000 bags. The minute I make it 2,000, they'll put a tariff there. So, so that's another problem why regionalism hasn't become, a free trade agreement hasn't come in place. We are right now discussing comprehensive economic partnership with Bangladesh, hoping we can sign it today. So many of this will get addressed. But in terms of border trade, again with Bangladesh and India, let's do the border, that's a very significant border trade that we have. Land border trade is a significant chunk of the total border bilateral that we have in Bangladesh. That 80% of the land border trade is actually taking place through Neighbourhood metropole, which is West Bengal. If you look at Assam, they have two very good land custom stations.
ICPs, which are, integrated checkposts, which have been built, functional, but border trade doesn't. There is marginal border trade taking place. Agartala has a fantastic, completely state-of-art ICP in place again, but I think not even 4,000 kind of cargo gets done. Simply because often when we, this is another argument I use against facilities, building facilities. We often say build better facilities, your border trade will improve. The worst facility India and Bangladesh have is actually on Manipal, the truck hole. You will find 120 trucks on both sides being, pulled up there because there's not enough space for you to. But that whole truckers lobby works so well that, during pandemic when the roads were blocked, a lot of cargo actually went to the ships. Again, inland waterways is something that we are all connected with, right? With Myanmar, with Bangladesh. I mean, we call it inland with them, we don't call it inland, but we can. Similar geographical pattern in terms of water flows. But it doesn't work. In Bangladesh, they use the internal river system for local public transport. They have huge debts and all of that, that's a separate story. But it's very effective in terms of cheap transportation. In India, our inland water transport system ministry is probably the worst ever. Ad nauseum, I've tried to work with them to see there's improvement. There is some progress, but again, so I'm saying, though the government right now, and we've got some, again on Myanmar side, as I said, Moretamo has the maximum amount of cross-border trade going on. We've actually opened up our ICP about 10 kilometers from there, from where Moretamo takes place. There is hardly any border trade going from. What happens on that particular ICP is, LCS, not ICP, is that people move. The people's movement takes place there effectively, but not cargo. Because there's some, issue about momentum of cargo. There is somebody's found a niche area and a niche travel route, they will continue to follow that. So that whether it's a truckers lobby, whether it's a human capital intensive issues, so often, but even with others, like with Nepal, we have a very flourishing open border trade. But there is so much more that we can do, even in terms of getting, barriers down. So again, it's very difficult in terms of, it's very easy for me to sit here and say it for 10 minutes and finish it off. But when it comes to actually detailing on every particular product, and also if you recall when we had signed a free trade agreement with Sri Lanka many years ago, some of you were probably just very young then, there was a lot of problems that we said that we had created our own palm oil industry because their palm oil, cheaper, easily available, was coming into. But over 10 years, it again eased out. So again, when we sign trade agreements with others, we are not, so again on border, we have something called border huts. That's an interesting example we have of capturing what was there in the past, where it's local, it's like a border like this. So the rule is, I think, 5 kilometers on both sides can come in there with whatever local produce you have, and you come and sell there, I come and sell. So Bangladesh and India, I think right now have 5 border huts, which are fabulous. I mean, the kind of intensive engagement that you see of the population. But you also will see that a lot of goods there are actually not made and manufactured in Bangladesh. So third country, but the fact that you've actually been pinned it down, that more than, I think, $100 a day each person who has a ticket, because if you come to that market, you have to be a kind of a shopper, seller tag. But we have actually tried to do that with Myanmar. Not effective as yet, but I'm saying the local, and I think this is something that has again been an article of faith for me, that mainland country, mainland cities, mainland capitals will always get connected because of their own facilities, their own resources. It's always the borderland which stays in the large, always marginal. So if we actually, as a South Asia region, take it forward, we need to move with the borderland. And for me, border huts and border trade is actually a case in point where we can improve facilities, and I've actually argued the case both for Myanmar, again in my Actis book, and on Bangladesh, that use border hut, which also has a security establishment, like there's a house for the local population on both sides, use that to impart education. The language is the same on both sides, in the northeast, and Myanmar also, similar, the local ethnic language. Provide medical facilities. Open up a dance school. Everybody now, irrespective of where you belong to, you're dancing to the same music, right, these days. So that's something, if you're not going to tap into your younger population, you will not have any inkling of what is going on. Because what your political people tell you is only a bit on the surface. what is actually going to happen in terms of policies being, built in through the point you made about how it has to be top down and not bottom up. In Northeast, again, I argue this bottoms up approach is actually more effective. So though it's smaller, so I've said instead of these big projects that we have in the Northeast, I've argued and with statistics and data to substantiate that we've now understood that small SMEs, small medium industries are actually able to provide you with greater returns, greater employment. So the number may be 20, right? But if you open up 20 SMEs, which can happen in 2 years turnout time, you'll be able to provide and tap into a lot more other products. In terms of large, projects that we've seen in Northeast, none of them have worked. None of them. In terms of industry, in terms of cargo travel. It's transport infrastructure projects, yes, but not in terms of goods production. So this is again on border. If we are not able to, again taking this argument to a different level completely, but since you're all students of politics at some point of time, you'll be discussing common rivers and common water system which we have with China, with Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. I've often said that we are discussing water flows and all of that, which is fine. We also have problems that we never know what the water flows are. We were doing a long ago project when I was at IDSA on waters in the region. So we went back to our water ministry, we did all of that. Nobody giving us any data, any statistics. Finally, we had to go back to the RB who gave us data and statistics. Because they followed, because it's very important for them to understand what the water flows are. But I'm saying while water flow discussion is on and we will sign agreements along the way, we need to re-examine water as a resource. Why do I need water? Not for argument, right? That this has so much and you're not giving me that much, just that's different level. But why do you need the water? Can we sit on the table and discuss that? As a resource, as a common resource that all of us are part of, can we discuss if it's meant for grains, it's meant for fisheries, it's meant for that, why are we not able to, as friendly neighbors, provide for each other? But again, these are, conversations that we are happening and I don't think it's been taken to any official level. But this is something, which is what I, saying that bottoms up approach is far more effective. Top level approach has to, like BIMSTEC will not function without a top down approach. You have to give it a push from the government. But in a lot of other side-by-side, things can happen simultaneously. That's when the bottoms-up approach is far more effective.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for such an informative lecture. My name is Shaban and I am first year student. So my question is, can you throw some light on the India-Myanmar relations and what are the reasons behind India's neutral stance against a recent military coup?
Okay, so again, this was 1999 that we had some operation with them called Operation Bird, where basically the joint forces got together. They tell us that Indian forces were not allowed into their MG for whatever the reason is, but they were able to clean up a lot of these northeast insurgent groups which are functioning from Myanmar. While we were doing this, I think just a month before that, we actually gave the Nehru Award to Aung San Suu Kyi, who was then the opposition leader. So this was to give a very clear message that while we are working with your military government because for security issues, we haven't lost interest of the core concern, which is democracy. So that is something, as I said, I'm a bit skeptic about our policies about it. And I do feel that to be a global power, you have to take a position. On Ukraine, my problem is also the same, that I have no issues with, there are lots of, again, it's never as clean as it looks, there are far more greater issues here. But on Myanmar, when we know that we will have to support a democratic transformation, why are we not sending a far more stronger message to the military as to, you need to clean up your act? But the problem with Myanmar that time, we have, as I said, we have great political affinity with each other, population-wise. Also in Myanmar, China and Thailand has the largest investment. China is not very popular there. They are able to do a lot, but it's openly everywhere we go, whether we do a think tank meeting, whether we are meeting the officials, they tell us that India needs to do more in terms of, having other things. So often we keep arguing that whether we should discuss their agro industry more because it's a very agro-based job. But we haven't looked at the agro industry at all. So we do a lot of capacity building in terms of like I-Tech stuff, which is like technical knowledge, computer stuff and all of that. But these are all really small catchment. there is not one big ticket that we do with Myanmar. That has been, which is why we thought Kaladan would be a big ticket issue, and we would be there at the Rada all the time. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But with Myanmar, our core concern, of course, as I say, is the northeast. We won't be able to address that. But that apart, in terms of our now, what Prime Minister Modi is, constantly positioning India as a gateway to the Southeast Asia, to Thailand. So he keeps talking about how we can drive through, right, one day and, have breakfast here and lunch there kind of a position. That can't happen if Myanmar is not on your side. So we need Myanmar to be, but at the same time, we also, and I keep saying this again and again, and I know it's easy for me to say it behind my computer and not be there in the government when they have to deal with far more hard issues, that the people of Myanmar will remember again that you sided with their military. So this is a difficult choice for us, and I've said this, let's call the bluff and see, that if we did take away our support from the government, not the government, the military junta, what would be the reaction? Because I'm pretty much convinced that when it comes to the insurgents, it's actually the ethnic population on the border which addresses us. And if we are able to deliver to them their needs, and the ethnic population in Myanmar is very, very deprived. While Yangon and Nopitio is very flashy, it looks like any modern city, the rest of Myanmar is a very different picture. And if we are able to provide in terms of some support system, whether it's health, whether it's education, those sectors which are very required, I'm sure we'll be able to, take our relationship forward. But again, that's that much a country can do. I mean, it's, again, as I said, easy to critique India, but how many, India has one, right? I mean, there's only that much. But it is certainly a core country for us, and in terms of the Indo-Pacific and everything that India is now staking its kind of position, Myanmar is a partner for India. So there is no way that we can let go, but at the same time, I think supporting democratic trends in Myanmar is something that we need to continue.
Good evening, ma'am. I am Manipal, the second year student of the department. Ma'am, thank you for the enlightening lecture. Ma'am, my question is, one of the biggest issue India is facing when it comes to neighborhood policies is the domestic perception of these countries about India. So these perceptions can actually be a result of policy failures through the years, and also the resultant big brother syndrome about these countries about India. So the receipt of when these countries receive the policies of India, they are much more skeptical about our policies. So how should India address this big brother syndrome so that our policies become more effective and it actually works?
I've said this often, no matter how much I rant and rave about India and India's policies, I actually think that neighbors love to hate India. They want everything from India, but they would love to get onto your nerves and do, all kinds of things. So this again, which I did speak a little bit when I was talking, that while there is a big brother in terms of sheer geography, we are big. There is no two ways on that. And also, I think I've often noticed, and maybe things have changed a little bit, but the way India treats US is not the way India treats Nepal. I mean, let any government official go, blue in the face to say this to me, but I've seen how the body language changes, your attitude changes. We've often had a feeling, and very rightly so, that is out to get you. The neighbors are always out to show you your position, because they've always been so wary and so insecure that at one point of time, this was very much in the aftermath of Sikkim, I'm told, that they always felt that India would go on taking over countries. That's not India, that's not how it was. And even the Sikkim takeover was done through a legitimate purpose and process. I mean, it wasn't as if India was saying that, but often it's, you just see only the top, you don't scratch underneath, right? So the surface, it was the impression, and often we've seen, I mean, let's look at the Nepal issue we had on the border. Indian government will tell you, oh, the government didn't do anything. Of course we didn't. With full information and knowledge, we did what we did. I remember there was a family friend in Kathmandu who actually came to stay with me in Kolkata because the school was closed. There was no fuel, there was no nothing. So they actually came, stayed with me for a month because going back to Kathmandu made no sense to them. And they bought those, electric heaters and those kind of things with them back. But every time I've met that boy, who's now about 18 years old, he always reminds me of the trauma of his, where for 1 year, for 1 month, in fact, they didn't go to school for longish because they said we had stopped all the supplies. So one day when that boy becomes a bureaucrat or takes up a political position, you think he's going to take a policy which is in favor of India? So there are a lot of things we do because we felt that what Nepal was doing was not great for us. Whatever the point is, don't make, because of the position or a particular policy the leader or the head of your country has taken, don't let the common people pay for it. Which is something that we've done many times. That, we'll punish you, but if you're punishing the leader, it's the common people who are affected, right? The leader gets access to all resources. We've never been able to, and which is what I'm arguing for Afghanistan today. That, of course, I'm not suggesting that allow terrorists into your border, that's not the point here. So let's not also look at the, security ambit through those angles always. So there is that constant, issue about India. But again, things have changed because I think there is this neighborhood first is a very positive refrain for every neighbor. So they will tell you, oh, it's so good to hear your Prime Minister talk about neighborhood first. And the third sentence is, oh, but he will do this for us. Which is fine, but at least they understand now that the government here is got a thrust, has got a focus. We're not able to deliver on many things, yes, but that is there. So that, as I said, the economies are all doing so much better. There's other indexes that they've really zoomed up, but they can't get over that mindset that, India is a big guy, they need to do so much more. So that big brother thing will take time, but at the same time, if I'm able to maintain a stable, and I think again the regional value chain and all of that come in handy, that if I'm able to make my economies integrated and, interdependent, then irrespective of what the political problems are, the local people or the local population, both sides, will continue to benefit. That's my take. That, if with Pakistan, right now, of course, it's a different matter, but if I was able to integrate my Punjab side economy with them, various other factors, the local population are hurting because, they are buying sugar and they are buying some basic food essentials from all over the world, not from India anymore. And, it just got possible. But of course, people forget, right? That these. So at the same time, while we have a particular policy for the government, I think we have to find ways, and I think that's where the local projects come in handy in terms of reaching up to your local population. So whether it's through border guards, whether it's through health facilities, and again in South Asia region, whoever can't afford medical in the US or in Singapore come to India. So why are we not improving, which is what the point I made about Afghan. Why are we not addressing that gap here? So that's something that we need to do. In terms of, like I say, this Bangladesh and India having an enjoying relationship that they've enjoyed before. It's so strong, it's so stable. But I'm only speaking for the government when I say this, because I know the government there is not very popular. In Bangladesh, everybody is very political. So either you're with one political party or with the other political party. You're not apolitical in Bangladesh. It's a typical Bengali way of looking at life, through always a political prism. So anybody and everybody who is not with this particular political party and government in Bangladesh doesn't like India because they don't like their own Prime Minister and they think the Prime Minister is only working with India. So it's a fallout that we have to face. There's no way out. So similarly, earlier with Nepal, we've seen that, Nepali Congress is something historically been very close with us. So whenever non-Nepali Congress came in, and of course all the new changes happened with those left leaders coming into the mainframe, it worked against us. So that's something, again, as I said, that why we keep saying we don't want to interfere, we don't want to, so domestic things come out of that, right? When you see a day-to-day interference or a day-to-day political connect. But here I've seen the neighbors want that. And they'll also, criticize you for that. So it's a tough game really, but again, someways India has in fact very officially, I think, told everybody, go ahead, do your elections, do everything, don't talk to us, don't tell us. But again, at the informal levels, everybody's so close. It's like really a large family when you go to any of the neighbors. You don't feel you've come abroad because they are so warm, so hospitable, so nice. So a lot of delivery mechanism takes place and they feel, oh, I should do this for this one, so let me go talk to my bureaucrat there. That's how it works in the region, unfortunately, but I don't think we'll be able to very easily shake off this big brother thing, but it's a fact that India does in the neighborhood far than anybody has done. I was just before coming, there was another project that I'm handling in terms of Indian investments. And the kind of investments we got in Nepal is unthinkable, and we are only talking about China and big ticket stuff. Actually, for the last 50 years, that the kind of money we've pushed in through various things that we've done in Nepal and elsewhere is unimaginable. Just that it's not there like a billboard that India has done this much. And India will say our policy is actually to keep quiet and do things quietly. But again, if the local population does not understand that, then how do we convince? So there's a kind of a game that you have to play, which I think this Prime Minister is doing very well. He's really pitching it hard. That you guys come first, you guys do it. But at another level, other efforts are on to ensure that people are going to be there. But every time there's a government who's very friendly with India, neighbor government, there's always be domestic constituency who's in opposition, and that stick is always going to be with us.
So my question was during your lecture you stressed upon what type of government comes into power. So how is India perceived by the neighborhood nations, between UP and NDA? How is it perceived by the neighborhood nations? And another question, I don't know how relevant is it to the topic. How has the domestic policies put forward by the India right now with the Hindu-Muslim issues and all, how that has affected our relationship with the neighborhood nations? Has there been any implications or so?
Simply said, huge implication. Every neighbor we speak to has always talked about this. As I said, I move a lot between some of the neighbors. Bangladesh, of course, is very, very wary about this, and they don't hesitate in mincing their words about it, but they do say it. All the other neighbors are, because they think there's a particular narrative that is happening there. Slightly digressing it, but we were discussing yesterday at BIF about Hinduism being practiced in America. So there's a huge, large number of people who actually are adopting yoga and having latte, turmeric latte and all of that, which we think which is Hinduism being practiced. But my main thing about that is that Hinduism, as we understand in terms of cultural traditions and norms, not necessarily in terms of course they're very fond of saying about how woman God is so strong, right, in our Hindu culture and understanding, which is not the case in many of their own religion, our own religion. So, but at the same time, when it comes to practicing, taking away the good practices from each other, which is fabulous. So, if turmeric latte works for you, is good for you, do it. But if the minute you can see it through a kind of a prism of religion, I'm very religious. I mean, I don't see why religion should be in the public space or political sphere. Of course, that's what political religion is all about. But I often say my policies need to be removed from there. I mean, I don't want to discuss. I mean, if you hear me talk, you should be able to say which religion I belong to. I mean, I have a bindi and I look particular, that's different. But I'm just saying that when I hold a particular position. So for me, that's the way I do it, but every government reacts. So similarly, like the way when a particular government in, say, Pakistan or in Bangladesh adopt a very strong religious in terms of their own policy within the constitutional thing, we react. So, that is true. So I think there is a bit of reaction, but again, it kind of cuts off because neighborhood being given kind of, but there are always questions and there are always, so it's never that everybody's at ease with it, but the fact that Prime Minister pushes, they see that quite visibly because he's talking about it, pushing about it. And I've often said this, that the neighbors are watching us so much more closely than I watch myself. So actually the neighbors, the newspapers call me for a bite. Oh, your Prime Minister said this. I said, okay, 1 minute, tell me what did he say? Because we don't watch it closely. We are part of it, right? We don't, but they watch us very closely. So any statement that they say or, anything that goes, which reflects the secular fabric, that's something that they really, and that's something in the neighborhood they all admire, the democratic and the secular fabric. They have ad nauseum, every country we go through always says this to us. It is absolutely fabulous how,
in India you do that. And we keep saying that there's so many Indias that you don't know about. Because, Bangladeshis only know about Bengal, know about Delhi, know about Mumbai, but they don't know about Manipal, they don't know about Kerala. Some will go for a holiday maybe, but not in a general way. Similarly for Nepal, they don't know some other sides of it. But there's so many India that we live in, and everything, all our thoughts and all of it take some part of that away. So I think there is always going to be some kind of because religion now in every country, not only in South Asia, has a kind of a connotation which works for some, which doesn't work for some. You will find a very, very antagonistic group as to, their positions are. While on the other side, some are so pro, saying that if you are able to formulate and implement policies positively through this framework, why not? So it cuts both ways, but there is a certain amount of wariness and apprehension about India provocating, especially when there are a lot of statements from the domestic leaders about a particular way that they, how they want to propagate Hinduism or whatever. So have a kind of reflection. There's another first question. What was that, please?
Government in power, like how other neighborhood.
Oh, in terms of elections and all of that, yeah. So you see what happens is because politically, India has always been very active with every political government, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Nepal, Bangladesh. So often what happens is, and despite the fact that you say that I want to work with all, and it's true there's certain times like in Nepal or like in Maldives for instance, there's one particular government which works more closely with you. So invariably, so when suppose they're out of power, I'm just saying for example, they're out of power, but they think that our embassy or whatever other people have greater interaction with other people and other, they'll often come to us for help, saying that can you talk to us. And I know this for sure, especially in the close neighbors. It's because I think there is so much of political movement among people. Everybody knows the political leadership very well. The bureaucracies know each other well. So it's a day-to-day thing. So they often feel that we, in some way, are able to support, influence, in a positive way, some of their outcomes. But often that's also seen, as I said, as interfering or something like that. But it's part of the however much. Officially, we keep saying that we are not going to interfere in your domestic policies or anything that happens. But because many of these policies they have some reflection with your neighbors or with us on the border somewhere, there's some amount of reaction which obviously takes place. So like, the map issue that we had recently with Nepal, it was, unnecessary. They could have dealt with it differently. We were so upset because we were working so closely with them. The pipeline had just got done, I think, and then this happened. So we thought, and in fact many friends in Nepal actually said the political leader there used this deliberately to consolidate his position. He wouldn't have used this just now, but he was feeling weak politically, so he wanted to use this anti-India whip to let people forget about his thing and see that he's taking a strong nationalist position. That's another thing which is globally working, right? Everybody's taking a very high, national, everybody's nationalist, come on. What is so new about that? But it's more interpretation. You are the Prime Minister of a particular country, of course you are going to support that nation, right? And why are you tagged as being nationalist? But right now I think there's a narrative, I think maybe begun with Trump or whatever, that, I'm nationalist. Give me a break. Really.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Devansh and I'm first year student here at the department. Ma'am, my question is regarding when you mentioned that India generally prefers bilateral route to multilateral route. So can you please expatiate a bit on that? That what were the problems in the past we faced and now what we have incorporated and we'll be working on that and using it in the future. And my second question is regarding Pakistan, that how much army factor has India has kept in mind while dealing with Pakistan. Thank you.
So going with the bilateral, see, I think SARC was the first attempt at a multilateral platform, regional multilateral platform. But we've always seen, so it is okay to hold summit meetings and discuss. And so free trade agreement was discussed in many ways. Preferential trade was being, kind of be put in place. But in terms of bilateral engagement, that's been a preferable choice simply because it's easier to deal with a particular country in terms of, suppose I have a particular issue on, say, whether it's trade, whether it's just anything, border discussion, for instance. It's so much easier to have you on the platform in terms of discussing the thing across the table and saying, the minute you start having a third person, which is where SARC came in, and it was, like I said, the sub-regional attempt was already included in SARC, but we were not able to do it. But every country, like India, is very predominant in South Asia. I mean, there is no two ways to say it. It is a predominant power. So every country, in fact, when SARC was actually suggested by Ziaur Rahman in Bangladesh, the initial reaction, if you look at some of the archival work which is available now, the first knee-jerk reaction was that, oh, these guys are planning to gang up against us. Because we were so wary that they were not meaning anything good for us. That was our reaction, and probably at that point of time, they didn't mean anything good for us. So, I mean, again, I'm getting a bit, digressing a bit, but during Mujibur Rahman, with whom we've had a fantastic relationship, when I'm talking about this because 50 years just happened and a lot of, euphoria about all of that. Even that time, because Mujibur Rahman, rather Bangladesh was not recognized by China, he was, sending out feelers. Because, I mean, every new country, every new leader, I mean, he was a leader from the streets, and, who came and brought, with the support of India, brought freedom and declared as an independent state. So he was wanting recognition from everyone and everybody. So he was working very closely through other countries, sending out feelers to China. We were very suspect, and because there was a particular work I've just published, in fact, a book that we launched in Bangladesh recently, where we talked about how, where I've talked about how even that time, though we were so closely working with Bangladesh government under Mujibur Rahman and Indira Gandhi here, we were very wary that what are they doing, what is the intention, why are they sending out feelers to China? So we often felt that we don't want them, and this is something, I mean, no government official will ever agree to saying this, that we always felt insecure and wary, and we always wanted to indicate the terms of engagement these neighbors would have with the other regional players. So whether it's US, whether it's China, there was one particular agreement that I think Nepal is about to sign with US in terms of, what is the particular tag to it. But I think India was so skeptic. Then what do you mean? And now we are saying that amount of money, oh, it's nothing, go ahead and do it. But initially when it was proposed, I think 10 or 12 years ago, I know I'm forgetting the particular name of this agreement that they have. They have it with Sri Lanka also, I think, and they had suggested with Nepal. We were very, very angry and upset. So we always felt that no other big power should come within India, or within South Asia. So we should have the first. So if you want to have a particular project, you should come to us first. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, because every country, and especially in this Indo-Pacific theatre now, I've actually argued that US and Russia and China are engaging much more with South Asia now, because they want to have coalition partners. I mean, coalition not in the formal sense of coalition, but some kind of establishing some rules of engagement. But India always wanted to do a one-to-one kind of a bilateral thing. It's only when they realized that the other powers are so wary, so skeptic, they would prefer multilateral platform. That, as I said, BIN or BBIN was one of the first initial thing. We've not been able to do much, but again, a lot of bilateral projects. Let me give you an example. When India and Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan are landlocked, right? So they can't access Bangladesh goods. So a lot of the cargo movement is to take place through our Siliguri border. There is one particular corner of 21 kilometers which links Nepal, Bhutan, India to Bangladesh. So they had wanted 24 hours transit. We actually turned around and said, why do you want 24 hours? What will you sell? What will you buy? You only sell ginger, you only sell lemon. I mean, that's not good enough. The point is, if you are allowing a sovereign entity to function and you expect to be treated with the same respect and dignity, you have to also give them that.
which India didn't understand. India was, oh boss, no, you are using my territory, so you better do what I'm telling you to do. So it's only 2010 we actually signed this agreement where we said 21st transit and all of that is allowed. So if we expect that they will understand so we were, always arguing for Bangladesh to give us transit so that Northeast can be easily accessible. Otherwise, any good to reach Northeast goes to very, circuitous route because everything was through either Myanmar or Bangladesh. But initially they were not agreeable. But then we learned how hard it pinches. So then we realized that if we are opening up and they are opening up, it's something that we can. But again, I would actually say to our government officials, again, I'm not sure how much they would actually say so in public, but their first choice of relationship is through the bilateral prism. But again, for every neighbor, if you ask them that how do you want to do business with India, they will tell you on a multilateral program. Because they feel that they're getting bullied, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but they often feel that the big brother is bullying you. And they will not be able to bully you when it's a multilateral platform. So that's how it works. You're Pakistan, there's something Pakistan.
I was regarding how much army factor India will...
Oh, the army factor. Yes, we always understand there is a significant army factor, but as I said, Prime Minister Modi, the kind of efforts he did in, going into an impromptu stop at Pakistan on one of his travel abroad to convey that we are friends, we are partners. I would say not only Prime Minister Modi, but it was Manmohan Singh, who was the first one who talked about having breakfast in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and lunch in Karachi, and tea in Delhi, which is possible if you were friendly and you could walk through, you could do a thing. But so I think every political leader in India has tried to engage, because simply, if you understand in India, our armed forces don't do any political engagement, right? They're always there at the back. Their job is to defend the country and take care of a security concern. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, also in many of the other countries in the neighborhood, the armed forces have come politically up front. And so what we've done is not push our own army or the armed forces to work with the defense forces to be there politically, but we've always tried to engage in that sense. So we've always supported democratic traditions, that's fine, because political engagement with the politically elected leader is something that we support or we want. But unfortunately in Pakistan, no matter how much, there were lots of, if you read many of the analysts, they'll tell you, some of them will have said that, there is no point talking to political leaders. And way back, 20 years ago, I remember in IDSA, Pakistan was discussed on a daily basis. So I mean, a whole lot of Pakistan is there in my head somewhere, locked in, because we were discussing. There was a huge narrative going on then, whether you should kind of disintegration of Pakistan was good for India, while I think the director that I was taken under in IDSA, he said no, unstable Pakistan is worse for you. So we saw a lot of these ethnic things that were happening in the northwest frontier and other parts of Pakistan. So there was two schools of support at that point of time in India. But the point here is that we always realized, no matter how they had we had Benazir Bhutto and all of that. But sadly, unfortunately, every time we were told, we were given evidence to see that it was always the armed forces and the army, especially in Pakistan, who was actually in the controls always. And that's a reality that we've had to deal with. And I don't think there's any political leader who as yet has been able to match it. At that time, of course, we had a series of democratic governments coming and going, but we've always seen everyone finally giving way to the army. So which the tradition continues even today.
Thank you, ma'am. This is, I hope everyone will agree that this is one of the most eloquent lecture you have visited in the last 1 year. Thank you for the grand narrative, actually, covering all aspects of South Asia, which is actually missing from our usual classes very much. So it will help you to write good answer in the coming exams, I'm sure. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'm really glad to be here to give a vote of thanks after a long time, dealing with only webinars and online lectures. thank Dr. Sreeradha Datta for coming all the way here to our department to speak to the students on a very, very important topic. In fact, as she has rightly mentioned, this is one of the top priority areas for India and its foreign policy. She has mentioned a lot of things regarding India's policy and its evolution towards its South Asian neighborhood in a very candid manner. I'm very sure that all of you would have found a lot of elements in this lecture which you don't usually get in academic writing, because she has mixed with in her narrative a lot of personal anecdotal experience which she has gained from the field as well as from the policy community in New Delhi, which I think certainly have added a lot of value to their knowledge, the students' knowledge on South Asia and India's foreign policy towards South Asia. So for that, I really thank you, Dr. Sreeradha, and also for spending at least 2/3 of the time on the Q&A. Thanks for your patience. And finally, also like what Remsa mentioned, for bringing the rain to Manipal. I would also like to thank Professor Nailapat, as always, for being the mentor and guiding us always in our endeavor to strive for excellence in the field, and also specifically for being present, being a very busy person he always is. I would also like to thank our head in charge, Dr. Ravindranathan, for his leadership and in planning this event and helping us organize this event well. I would also like to thank actually the university leadership, the Manipal Academy of Higher Education, for enabling her visit to the university and also making sure that she spends a couple of hours here to speak with the students and the faculty. I would also like to thank Mr. Anurag for taking the efforts to make the poster for the program. And first and last but not the least, I would like to thank all the students who have come here at as all of you are knowing that they are in a very tight schedule as of now, because they are having exams next week and a lot of them are in their final stages of submission of their dissertations. So in all this hectic schedule, they have found time to be here, and not just be here, remove all their exam fears for some time and listen to you carefully, because we have seen a lot of questions which have come up today, and it also shows the interest they are having towards this, because at least 10 to 15 students here are developing an interest in South Asia, India's neighborhood, India's foreign policy, and even Southeast Asia, Myanmar. And some of the students in the senior classes, they are also doing dissertations on this area, like for example BIMSTEC, or for that matter the hydropolitics in Himalayas, or refugee issues, even security issues. So thank you once again all for being here and making this event a huge success, because this is, as I told you, a unique event because it is coming after a long time, an offline talk being delivered, and we have certainly seen how different an offline experience is compared to an online one. So thank you all, thank you Dr. Sreeradha once again for this. So have a good evening. Thank you.